Hello and welcome to Hartford Open Day, and particularly for those of you who are interested in applying for music at Hartford. We're going to stage a discussion between a current undergraduate, Maddie, and two of the music tutors. And Maddie's going to ask the kind of questions which an applicant might be expected to ask at an open day. So we're just going to introduce ourselves. My name is Ben Skip, and I'm the organising tutor in music at Hartford College.
Hello, I'm Alice Barron, and I'm a college lecturer in music at Hartford College.
Hi, I'm Maddie, and I've just finished my finals in music at Hartford.
And Maddie's going to ask the questions, and
I am.
Alice and I will respond. Afterwards, there'll be a chance for Maddie to fill in any gaps which Alice and I may have possibly forgotten. So, Maddie, do you want to kick off with your first question?
Of course. So firstly, what are the key features of the Oxford syllabus?
So what are the key features of the Oxford syllabus? Well, the Oxford syllabus in music is a very varied course, and some parts of the course are compulsory and some parts are optional. And the course focuses on music history topics and musical analysis and techniques of composition, which is where you compose in the style of other composers. And these components tend to be compulsory throughout the 3 years, although you don't have to do the techniques of composition bit in your second and third years. And then alongside that are a range of options which you choose as a student. So things like composition, performance, a whole range of performing modules. So you could do performance, or you could do chamber music, or you could do choral performance, or you could do choral conducting. In addition to that, there are some specialist history courses which are called List C, and these reflect the interests of the music faculty professors. So there's a range and a balance between doing compulsory options, which those options which we consider to be most important to your musical development, and a whole range of various other papers which you can take, which means that the degree ultimately can reflect your own interests. And it's worth also pointing out that these different options are examined in a variety of ways. So some are examined in conventional exam situations, and some of these are examined through portfolio coursework. And I would say it's probably about 50-50 across.
Can you expand a little bit on kind of what stages of your sort of education over 3 years you will be examined or have to hand in coursework as well?
So in the first year, which is called prelims, you do your end of year exams, which include, I think 3 out of 6 of them are written papers and the others are portfolio. And then in your second and third year, you don't do any exams at all in your second year. It's not an assessed year. The second year is an opportunity to explore lots of different papers and to explore different options, but you're not assessed in any way in your second year. And then at the end of your third year, you take a mixture of exams and coursework. Some of that coursework you might have done in your second year, but you don't hand it in until the end of your third year.
Perfect. And my next question is, could you tell me a little bit about what college teaching is like at Hartford?
So college teaching at Hartford is mainly in small groups tutorials, and at Hartford that's normally 3 students in each year, and for most tutorials you will need to submit either an essay or some work, an analysis or composition. The tutorial will then be spent having feedback and conversations about your work, maybe exchanging ideas with the other students, and generally having a very open dialogue. It's your chance to ask questions or ask for further reading, and it's also a great opportunity to really hone some of the skills by having this regular feedback from the tutors. Ben, would you like to add some more?
Absolutely. So the strength of the tutorial system is that you have, as Alice says, a very close relationship with the person who's giving you the tutorials. And at Hartford, we've got 3 tutors. I'm interested in analysis and music history, and my doctorate was on minimalism. So I'm particularly interested in minimalism, but I do teach a range of history options. And Dr. Tom Chappell is the 3rd tutor who's not here. His specialism is in early music topics, so he tends to teach music history before 1700. And I'll just let Alice tell you what her particular interests are as well.
So my doctorate was in the South Indian violin system, and so I'm very interested in particularly ethnographic ways of looking at music and the violin in all sorts of different musical traditions.
So you see that our interests are quite different, and through our different interests, you'll probably it will probably cover most of the course. So you have a lot of tutorials with us, which we consider to be a strength of Hartford. And then we would send you off to different tutors in different colleges for other areas that you're interested in. So the tutorial system works very well because you get that very personalized specialist tutorial and teaching system.
Perfect. And what music facilities are available at Hartford, and how easy is it to get involved in extracurricular music? So that's sort of double question there for you, but
Oh, great question. So Hartford is known for its very active music society. I believe Maddie was actually perhaps the president of music.
No, I was the social secretary. I organised the dinners.
Okay, Maddie was the social secretary, which is just as important. So the music society at Hartford is very active, one of the most active in the university, and put on concerts and social events and things like jazz and cocktails, which is always very popular. So there's a lot going on musically. We have an excellent choir, which is run by the choral scholars. And if you're interested in that, you can search for that online, and there's plenty of information about singing in the choir. We also have an organ scholar who conducts that. So there's a lot going on within college, and in terms of our facilities, we've got a very nice Steinway in the principal's lodgings. We have a lovely organ and chapel. It really is a sort of jewel of the college. And we have a practice room as well, which hopefully will be refurbished in the near future. So there's a fair amount, and of course we're quite close to the music faculty itself. So you can always walk down to the music faculty to practice, should you wish to. Has that covered everything, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably also maybe important to point out that for all of my years as an undergrad, I had a keyboard in my room, which was just, I mean, it was fundamental to the music degree, just to be able to sort of batter any analysis scores. And so that's all provided by the college, which is brilliant. But yeah, thank you. Next, where is it sort of possible to meet students from other colleges? I know you sort of touched on this with the extracurricular music, but could you sort of expand on that?
Yes. Yes, through the extracurricular music, you will meet musicians from other colleges, whether that be through Hartford societies or through university orchestras and choirs. But it's also worth saying that the lectures take place in the music faculty, and you will rub shoulders with music students in other colleges, which is very important because music is a small subject. It takes about 70 students a year total, and we take 3 at Hartford, and other colleges take up to 6. So there's no college which takes a huge number, but the lectures are a good opportunity to meet and collaborate with students from other colleges.
And then back to sort of the curriculum. Is the curriculum diverse in terms of the modules and topics that it covers?
So it's really becoming increasingly more and more diverse. And I mean, I personally think it's a very exciting time in music. And I'm particularly interested in this move away from always looking at a score in terms of how we understand music. And obviously, as Ben's already mentioned, there is that score-based, that chance to do score-based work and more historical understanding of music. But there are also lots of other opportunities. For example, thinking of music as performance, looking at the body in music, recordings, social and cultural studies of music, music's role in education and the community, courses to do with race and gender, appropriation, authorship, collaboration. It's becoming a subject that really can encompass so many different fields, and that's why it's particularly interesting having these tutorials where we can discuss these topics that are constantly changing and evolving and becoming prominent topics in music as well as in the wider world.
Fabulous. And is it possible to do a year abroad in a music degree?
Not as part of the degree, no. We don't have a year out option where you can go and study abroad. But in Hartford, you have this recent innovation called the Enrichment Fund, where we are encouraged to use some funds to enrich, as it's out here, the clues in the name, to enrich the students' musical lives. And it's worth saying that this September, I'm taking a group of students to Vienna, all being well. And we shall be staying in Vienna for 3 days and blitzing the museums and galleries and concert life. So Hartford is trying to provide opportunities to go abroad outside of the formal structure.
And then sort of onto the application process, what sort of thing would you ask at an interview?
So in the interview, there's really 3 different sections. There will be one part that is based on looking at some scores, and another where you'll look at a text, read a short extract, and finally some questions and discussions about anything from your personal statement and submitted work. So in general, I mean, it's a friendly and a general discussion, a bit like a tutorial, and we really want to bring the best out in you and for you to feel comfortable, and and also like you're able to ask any questions that you would like to know. So it's a general discussion, and all these different elements may lead into all sorts of directions. It's not necessarily a question of finding a right or wrong answer, but seeing how you think and respond to the questions.
Okay, and how can a prospective applicant make their application stronger? So sort of what are you looking for in a candidate, a good candidate?
I think a good candidate will show that they've engaged with music as a multifarious thing. So if you can show that you think about music as a social practice, as well as thinking about music as a performance or a notated score, for example. So the student or the applicant needs to show that they've thought about music in a way that's sort of complicated and nuanced and beyond the scope, perhaps, of their course. And we're not asking for, sort of perfect answers, but we just want to see that someone has thought about music in a way that shows critical thinking. So this might be illustrated, for example, by reference to some interesting books that you've read in your personal statement, for example, or some interesting performances that you've done, or something that you heard on the radio, or a question that's emerged to you through the course that you've been studying at school. And also in a discussion, as Alice said in the interview, it will become clear if you've begun to think critically about music, I think. So you want to start that kind of process as early as possible by reading around the subjects that you're studying at school, and also to engage in conversation with other musicians, because it's really important that you exchange ideas with other thinking musicians, and you can do that with your teachers at school or with your peers, and I think that's a very good practice. yeah, you're welcome to chip in, either of you, if you've got anything to add. I mean, Maddie, you've been through the experience, so you
I've
can
been through the
say.
experience. Yeah, I suppose I did bits and bobs of work experience working with musical people. I mean, I don't know. I've never sat on the other side of the judging panel, as it were. I don't really know what you look for. But in terms of what I did, music was very much my focus. I did a lot of reading around it, and I was doing a lot of sort of extracurricular performance as well, which I think quite a lot of music students do. Even though it's an academic degree, a lot of them have that focus on music performance as well.
And I would add to both of those points that you can start to question some of the books you're reading, and also the performances you're part of and attending. Start asking questions. You don't need to come up with any answers, but that'll help you start thinking more critically, as Ben was saying.
And then just sort of building on this idea that a lot of music students are very keen performers as well. How should someone decide whether to apply to Oxford or apply to a conservatoire?
I think that's a very important question, and it can be a difficult decision for some people. I'm lucky to have had experience studying in both a university and a conservatoire, and they are incredibly different. At Oxford, you can opt to do some performance, but you will also, that'll be part of a very broad degree where there is a large amount of essay writing, and as we've been talking about, with analysis, composition, those kind of elements. I think it's worth saying that quite a lot of keen performers who are studying at Oxford use the long holidays for some more intensive lessons and practice time. But obviously, if you want to be practicing all the time, then a conservatoire might be a better option. And then the other options are joint courses split between universities and conservatoires, or coming to a university first, like Oxford, as many students do, and then they go on to do a postgraduate course at a conservatoire. So yeah, I would have a think about what it is you want to spend the next 3 years doing, whether it is this kind of broad and quite diverse degree that we've been talking about, or focusing primarily on performance.
Okay, and then I've got a question for all of us actually, which is what we would recommend to read for prospective applicants. So I don't mind who starts. Ben, do you want to start?
Okay. So one of my favorite writers about music is this very grand and established academic called Richard Taruskin, and he's been writing about music for years, and he's quite polemical. He has a real strong opinion and a strong voice, and sometimes I agree with him and sometimes I disagree with him. But as Alice was saying, sometimes it can be very useful to find a viewpoint that you either don't agree with wholeheartedly or disagree with in totality. So I would recommend this book called The Danger of Music and Other Anti-Utopian Essays. And it's a collection of Richard Taruskin's writing that he wrote both in academic journals, but also in newspapers in America. So there's a range of registers and topics, and it's very varied. And I just find him a great wordsmith. You know, he's really a wonderful person to read, even if you disagree with what he's saying. So yes, The Danger of Music by Richard Taruskin.
So my recommendation is a short book, because a lot of people read Nicholas Cook's very short introduction to music before interviews. And I would really encourage you to look at the world music edition from the same series. It's by Philip Bowman, a very short introduction to world music. And I think this is great because it's a short book, and it brings perspectives and examples from musical traditions around the world. It's also got recommended listening and further references if you want to find out more about anything that is touched on in this book. So I would say that's a great place to start.
And then my recommendation is something completely different again, and this is actually something that I read before I was a student at Oxford, and it got me really interested in sort of music psychology, and it's a book called Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks, who is sort of first and foremost a neuroscientist, works with people's brains, but sort of specialises in music therapy, and it's essentially a book of case studies with working with people with specific sort of neurological disabilities, and looking at how music can help them, and it's just absolutely fascinating and interesting. I mean, you could read it as a sort of bedtime story because it's such a lovely book, but I mean, it's affordable and it's a really good introduction to sort of the academic side of music psychology.
Yes, and just following on from that, Maddie, one of the options that you did this year, I think, was music and psychology. Is that right?
Music perception, yeah. So essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and I just wondered if there was any thing you wanted to say about your time at Hartford and at Oxford, and what your plans are after you finish your degree.
Of course. So my biggest takeaway, I've loved my 3 years, and each year has had its own merits. First year was just a brilliant chance to sort of explore different things, meet different people, and sort of find your footing, really. Second year, as Ben said earlier, you're not examined, and so it is a chance to sort of grow, but it's also a chance to really enjoy Oxford as a city. I definitely wouldn't waste that. I mean, obviously, focus on academia, it's brilliant fun, but do sort of go and explore the wider world a bit. And then third year, finals, I just adored the ability to go and sort of research things for myself. And that was really important for me, that obviously I had good support from all of my tutors for all of my 3 years, but just that time to really focus on things that interested me. And so this kind of music psychology side of it. And also I'm a big jazz fan, always have been, probably always will be. And the fact that I could essentially tailor my degree to focus on jazz, and especially I did a sort of research project and ethnographic study in Chicago looking at the jazz scene there. And it's just the ability to sort of do things for yourself but still be supported by sort of people who actually know what they're talking about has just been brilliant. Going forward from this, I am actually applying for a master's to focus on music psychology, so clearly there's a genuine love for that. But hopefully one day I will work in jazz. I think that's still the dream. So we'll see what happens to the world, I suppose. But and then my final question for both of you, to sort of end things off and sort of sell the college bit, is why do you like teaching at Hartford?
Well, the thing that I love about Hartford are the students. They're a great, fantastic, musical, interested bunch of people. So it's a privilege to work with them. Aside from that, also, it's worth saying that Hartford is very pretty, and is in the centre of the city. So I've always felt very lucky to be working in this gorgeous, central and historic site. So yeah, it's the people and it's the buildings for me.
For me, Hartford, I think, is probably the most friendly and welcoming college that I've experienced at Oxford. And I mean, as Ben said, that's down to the people. And I hope everyone feels very welcome there, and it definitely feels that way amongst the students and the staff. It's a very supportive environment, and there's even a cat. And the library as well is a fantastic resource, and the librarian, Alice Rokes, is incredibly helpful. So we do have a really wonderful environment for learning and for living and feeling, hopefully having a happy time studying and living in Oxford.
Amazing. Well, I've asked all the questions I could think about. I don't know whether you want to sort of open up to people emailing you with specific questions or something, if they have any other questions that we haven't covered. Or...
Yeah. On the website, if you go to the music page, you'll see details of me and Alice and the third tutor, Tom Chappell. And I would encourage you, if you're interested and you still have further questions, as Maddie says, send me an email. So it's benjamin.skip@hartford.ox.ac.uk. But that's on the website, so you don't have to remember that. Send me an email, and it'd be lovely to hear from people who are interested. And you can ask me anything, and if I don't know the answer, I'll direct you to someone in college who does. So thanks very much for watching, and I hope very much to see you hopefully in December.